I want you to picture this scenario. It's the middle of the trading session, and you've taken a few losing trades. You're down a few $100, and you can't help but think of the fact that you're supposed to be green for the day. Just the very thought of being red is infuriating to you, and instead of closing up shop, instead of walking away from the screens, you decide to make the brilliant idea to continue trading. As you decide to place more and more trades with the idea of making money, you start to lose track of time. At some point, you realize that you can't enter anymore because you have no more funds in your account. At this point in time, you have overtraded and you simply blew up your entire account. This very experience is something that I, along with almost every single trader, has encountered at least once throughout their career. And I'm making this video not for the beginning trader. In fact, if you're just starting, I recommend that you look at the other video that I just posted. But this is for the trader who is trading with a profitable edge, meaning that they've backtested and know that they're actually trading with a statistical advantage over the markets. And two, have realized that upon getting emotional, they find it difficult to do the right thing and follow that edge. Therefore, this video is a blueprint of how I, someone who has continuously overtraded and has blown up a lot of their accounts, how I have now been able to limit the amount of what I call junk trades, or essentially trades that you aren't supposed to take. I have limited that amount of trades to nearly zero. And I want to show you how I did it.
So first things first, let's define what is overtrading. Overtrading is when you take trades that do not align with your long-term profitable edge. So that means that you might make money today, might even make money tomorrow, but over the long term, you are very, very, very likely to not make money. And in fact, you're going to lose money. And we're going to think of the sniper who, instead of taking shots when he's supposed to, instead of assessing the conditions that he needs to meet in order for him to pull the trigger, he simply just takes a random shot simply just because he felt like it. Maybe he felt FOMO of not hitting the target, so he just decides to randomly pull the trigger. So that's essentially what you're doing when you're overtrading. You are the sniper who, instead of doing his job well, you are simply firing shots rapidly with the hope of one of them hitting. So the second step is you need to cement in your mind that overtrading is not necessarily bad, but that it will move you away from profitability. And if your goal is to lose money in the markets, then I guess you don't need to get rid of overtrading. But if you plan to keep the money that you make, then you have to cement in your mind that overtrading leads away from profitability and thus is something that you need to work towards and eventually lessen that habit over time. Step number 2 is to create a rule in your system, meaning that, and this is what I do, I literally have a doc full of the rules that I choose not to break because they lead me away from profitability. And if I break that rule, then I tell myself that I will not trade the following day. And so with this accumulation of rules, it's good because you're able to actually keep track of the amount of times that you break that rule. And you do this because you're able to set a goal, which is the objective to lessen the frequency of the times that you break that rule in your system. And I wanted to give a quick example and state that in the past, I would literally take almost 10 trades, 5 trades a day. And I realized that after some point, those trades were not actually profitable trades. Like they had no statistical edge, and therefore I was overtrading. And what I did was I put a rule in place, and this is specific to me, but that rule states that I cannot take more than 2 trades in a single day. And if you have a habit of maybe after 3 trades in the day, then you are a lot more susceptible to overtrading, then I recommend putting that rule as take no more than 3 trades a day, or however many trades that you find out where you start to overtrade after that. Now, before we go into the actionable steps for what you can do about overtrading, I did want to mention that these steps work not just for overtrading, but also for a lot of the other habits which may result in unprofitability. So that could also be hesitation for some people. For me, I've always been the type to just pull the trigger, and it was a battle to not pull the trigger. But for some people, they might freeze when it comes time for them to actually pull the trigger and actually take a trade. And you have to understand that these are actions that we do when we are feeling emotions. And it's not a matter of reducing the emotions we feel, but rather picking up on those emotions from an earlier standpoint so that we can tackle those emotions and prevent it from actually snowballing. It's as if you're trying to, it's almost as if when you try to stop a snowball at the bottom of the hill, you're pretty much going to eat the whole snowball. But if you can stop that snowball in the very beginning, it's a lot easier to do the right thing. And I just wanted to let you know that the things I'm going to list and the things that you're going to learn might not work for you. And I say that not because they're invalid, but because we all come with different beliefs coming into trading. And there are certain beliefs that you need to tackle. And so these mindsets or these steps might not solve your individual problem. And quick tip, if you've never backtested your strategy, start there. And I say that because a lot of my own psychology problems I was able to fix simply from just backtesting my edge, knowing that it was actually profitable over the course of 100 to 200 trades. Now for the third step, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into why it actually happens. Why do we overtrade? Because we all know that it's bad, but if you're watching this video, then it means that you want to get better at reducing the financial consequences of your habits. Speaking from personal experience, I overtraded because I felt FOMO. I felt as though if I were to walk away from the charts and step away, I would be leaving money on the table. Money that I would regret, knowing that if I came back to the charts and I saw that at that point in time, I could have entered and I could have made money, then that pain of FOMO would be really intense. And that's why I just decided to, instead of being that sniper who takes trades very calculated, I would quite literally buy and sell, and pretty much act as if I had a machine gun in hand where I could just hold the trigger and the bullets are going to come out. The first time that I came across this concept, it was in a book called The Mental Game of Trading, which I highly recommend everyone to actually read for themselves. But in it, the author states that essentially once you become super emotional, you literally cannot control yourself from not taking actions and from not acting on those impulses. And like I said with the snowball, it's a lot easier to stop that snowball at the very beginning. So this is why the first step to conquering overtrading is to not even think about stopping yourself from overtrading, but rather to note down how are you feeling in the moment. And you're going to do this in a journal as you're trading. So if there's a specific scenario which takes place, you are able to jot that down and state, I see X happening, and thus I am feeling Y. So you're quite literally able to refer back to this journal in the future and see and record the amount of times that you actually are becoming emotional. And from this, you can start to track the buildup. I'll give a very quick example with my situation. It was only because I started to track down my emotions in real time when I found out that once I took more than about 2 trades, win or loss, then I would start to do things irrationally or out of impulse. And therefore, I was able to create the rule. So I wouldn't have been able to have done that had I not journaled and actually taking notes of the things that I'm observing and as a result, how I am feeling. We overtrade because at some point, once we get too emotional, then we can't help but act out our impulses. So from here, the game becomes being aware of your emotions first. So in order to actually solve the problem, you have to first become aware of the problem. So you need to build that awareness first and understand what are the situations that are making me emotional. And you want to catch the snowball earlier and earlier. So when you first start journaling, you might only really pick up on the fact that you're angry after something drastic happens. Like you actually overtraded, then you're like, oh shoot, I'm very emotional right now. And the second time you journal, you might be able to catch onto those feelings even earlier. So it's important that you actually put in place a journal so that you can refer back to it in the future. And you want to keep track of the specific situations that take place beforehand so that you're better able to stop that snowball from actually getting bigger and bigger. And one really cool thing that you'll notice is once you bring awareness to your emotions, the likelihood of you actually acting out on those impulses drastically drastically gets reduced, because a lot of the times when we act out emotionally, it's because we don't even know that we are emotional until we do the action that quite literally tells us that we are emotional. So by bringing that awareness, you're able to stop yourself from doing a lot of the actions that results in unprofitability. And now that you have some sort of log for the different situations that result in you feeling emotions and the specific emotions themselves, you are able to start picking up on them in real time. I read this book called Emotional Intelligence. It's by Daniel Goleman. Highly would recommend you reading this. And in it, he talks about what are you supposed to do when you are feeling those emotions? And upon recognizing those emotions, because remember, first step is awareness, second step is what you choose to do with those emotions. Now, if you decide to act out on those initial impulses, like you feel angry, then you just overtrade, then guess what? You are going to get more and more emotional. The snowball gets bigger. So you want to stop that snowball ASAP. And you do that by the easiest way for this is just to give an example. One of the things that makes me pretty emotional is when it looks as if there is a setup taking place, but there's something wrong with that setup. So it's like the sniper who he sees everything lining up, all the conditions are meeting except one. And he tells himself that because that one condition is not met, he is not going to pull the trigger. So when that comes to trading, when everything looks like it's going well, but that last criteria is not met, if that trade ends up becoming very profitable, I usually will feel a lot of FOMO because it's like, man, I was so close to actually entering that trade and I could have made a lot of money, but here I am sitting on the sides. And in that situation, it helps to counter that thought with a different perspective. So I've quite literally trained myself to, when I start to feel those emotions of FOMO, I think to myself, you are only feeling these emotions because you saw the trade work out in a profitable manner. If the trade was actually red, I would be thinking to myself, phew, good thing I didn't take that trade. So as you can see, the emotions, it's out of hindsight bias. And we all know that as long as you take trades that align with your edge, you're going to make money. You don't have to be taking a bunch of random trades, because at the end of the day, all you have to do to become profitable is to just take the trades that align with your edge. All right, so wrapping up that first step, when you recognize those emotions, from there, challenge it with a thought and reframe the situation. One mental framework that really helps me is that let's break down what FOMO means. Fear of missing out. So it's not just necessarily money, but it's fear of losing out on something. It's fear of losing out on gaining something. And that's the key word, gaining something. I feel as though I'm not capitalizing on a situation. So instead, what I do is instead of thinking to myself, I'm losing out on potential profits, I reframe that towards I'm gaining discipline by not taking the trade. So as you can see, I'm able to switch those feelings of losing towards something of gaining. Now, the gaining might not be money in the short term. Like, obviously, by sitting out on a trade, I am not leaving myself open to making or losing money, but I am gaining discipline by only sticking to the trades that I'm supposed to be taking instead. And one other mental framework that I did want to mention is I'm specifically talking about FOMO, but when you do see a setup forming and you feel as though you can take the trade and possibly make money over it, you have to think in the future. So, by forecasting how you are likely to feel after taking the trade, win or loss, if that feeling is regret, not because you lost money, but because you acted out of impulse and you didn't follow your plan, then once you forecast that regret, you are a lot less likely to take that trade that you want to out of impulse because you're essentially feeling emotions from the future and you're acting and doing the right things in the present. In the book, after you challenge that thought, it helps to remember what you are supposed to be doing in the present moment. So if I feel that FOMO, then first I go through that whole entire process that I just described. And second of all, I then remind myself of what I need to be doing in the moment. So if there isn't a trade that's forming, then my goal is to preserve my mental and financial capital. And the good thing about reading more books or simply showing up to the markets on a day to day basis is that you will naturally start to find ways to reframe what is happening in the moment. And so that idea of me reframing FOMO, like fear that I'm missing out on profits, into I am gaining discipline, that is something that only popped up into my head once I was trading live in the markets. And for your specific individual problems or for the specific situations which tend to evoke those emotions, you'll just naturally start to find ways to reframe those emotions or reframe the situation into something that feels a lot more acceptable in the moment.
So I'm coming in with a quick edit for what the step-by-step process looks like at this point in time when you're trading in real time. So step number one, you're probably going to feel some sort of emotion and you're going to notice that. So in this case, it's going to be anger. Step number two, you're going to point out or write out, why am I feeling angry? So in this case, I'm going to be writing out, I'm starting to feel angry because I noticed that I just took 2 losses in a row. Step number three, you want to come in with your challenging thought. In this case, it's going to be, I might have taken a few losses in a row, but all of those trades were a part of my technical edge and therefore something that I was supposed to take. Because of that, I did what I needed to in the moment, and the outcome of those trades just so happened to be the outcome. Step number four, you're going to want to think about what you have control over at that moment in time. So in this case, I'm going to think to myself, all the other trades that happened that I took were in the past, but what I can do is focus on what I need to do right now. So that might be walking away from the screens, or that might be continuing to trade as if nothing happened. Step number five, after writing out everything, I can assess whether or not it's the best idea to either completely walk away or whether I still have enough mental capital, or basically just my ability to follow my plan, whether I have enough mental capital to continue trading or not.
So remember what I talked about, how for me, I had to steadily reduce the amount of junk trades. And again, by junk trade, I just mean trades that you're not supposed to take. By me reducing the amount of junk trades that I took, I didn't necessarily eliminate it right off the bat. In fact, even now, I still might take a junk trade here and then. But the frequency of which I take junk trades is is reduced incredibly. So, the first thing that you need to understand is it's a choice. Once you make the junk trade, it's a choice to either beat yourself up about it and think that you're the worst person ever who is never going to become profitable because you can't follow your rules. You can think that way, or what you can do is think of it as a learning lesson. And let me tell you one thing, it's that if you go and you decide to enter that snowball of associating with that failure, the short term failure, it's going to be a lot harder for you to actually recover and do the right thing over the long term. In fact, you're probably going to end up creating your own different snowball, and you're probably going to maybe start eating unhealthy. You're going to start skipping out on the gym or whatever. Basically, just things that you're supposed to be doing in your outside life. When you have the mindset that you're like a loser in trading, you're a lot less likely to actually do the things that you need to be doing outside of trading. So, and I learned that from personal experience. So, the next best option is to look at it as a learning experience. Remember, you want to be gentle with yourself, but tough on your mistakes. You're not just going to tell yourself, you know what, it's okay that I overtraded. Because guess what? It's not. There's a reason why you want to be moving away from overtrading, but you have to categorize it as a mistake that provides you a learning lesson. And once you reframe in your head that it's a learning lesson, then you're a lot more likely to, one, not identify with that mistake, and two, do the right thing in the long term. So, the importance of actually jotting down in your journal how you're feeling is because you're able to go back. At the end of the day, you're able to go back to that journal and see what were the things that led up to your actions. And from there, you can actually revise and form a plan to make sure that that snowball stops building momentum. And I'll give a quick example. When I overtraded in the past, I was able to keep stopping the snowball earlier and earlier and earlier. Or rather, I was able to start jotting how I was feeling earlier and earlier and earlier. And I don't know how long it took me, but I realized that a lot of it was just attributed to me not having a lot of sleep. And from there, I was able to make a rule for myself where if I woke up feeling extremely tired, if not agitated, and just feeling very emotional, then I am not going to trade for that particular day. Or if anything, then I'll give myself extra time to sleep in and then wake up to show up into the markets. Because again, you'd rather miss out on one trade or a few trades than show up to the markets feeling very emotional and snowballing into a series of overtrading that can literally blow up your account in the matter of a few hours, even. It's important to refer back to your journal because from then you are actually able to, one, assess if you can continue trading in the future. So, for example, if there's a situation which you know that is likely to really trigger you, then the best step is to just walk away. Or two, when you come across that same situation or similar situation, then you can implement a mental framework. And by mental framework, I mean one of those countering thoughts, but you can literally write it down and use it for a future instance so that you're able to stop the snowball at an earlier point in time. And what you'll notice is that when you stop that snowball quicker and quicker, then the amount of junk trades that you take, it's not going to just be completely eliminated, but like what I said, the frequency of you taking those junk trades is going to get less and less. Not only are you going to reduce the amount of capital that you lose from those blowups, but you're also going to reduce the frequency of which those blowups actually take place. Thus, you are a lot more likely to keep the money that you make, and thus, you are trading in a profitable manner. I wanted to talk a little bit about emotional buildup, similar to emotional buildup throughout the trading day when certain situations take place. But I wanted to refer to emotional buildup outside of the charts. So, this is something that I'm, even to this day, I have to work with or that I'm still working through. But when I do something such as take a junk trade, more often than not, when I'm doing a random activity in the day, that thought is going to pop up into my head. Like I'll literally be hitting a set of like bench press, and then it's like, ah, oh, damn, you unnecessarily lost money because you took a junk trade that didn't follow your profitable edge. And then literally mid set, I got to stop and then just re rack and kind of, you know, do what I'm supposed to do. So, going to be addressing that. What do you do and how do you prevent the emotional buildup taking place outside of the charts? And the very simple answer is that it's literally the same thing as if you were trading, or it's literally the same thing that you do in your trading session, where you want to refer back to that not easy, but the simple two-step process of one, being aware of those thoughts and countering it with an opposing thought, and two, going back to the present moment and just focusing on what you need to be doing. Now, even if you're trading for multiple hours of the day, majority of the time, majority of your day, you're not going to be trading. Like even though I only trade for anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 hours or 6 hours of the day, I have a life outside of trading. And in that life, I have to be doing what I need to be doing in order to best execute, in order to best get the results that I want. So if my goal is to, develop a better physique in the gym, I can't be thinking about what happened in my trading session hours ago. I have to be just focused on that single session and what I need to be doing in that specific exercise. So that's basically what you have to do in order to prevent that emotional snowball, because the major financial consequences isn't really going to happen in a day. Like if you blow up your account, it's usually not just because of what happened that day. It's really more often because of the events and the mental, like your mindset that you had already coming into that day. If anything, it's actually like a buildup. So I've read plenty of books on trading, and some of the top traders have noticed that in their outside life, when they're going through something very emotional, such as a divorce, their trading more often than not tends to suffer because things just start to build up. Your emotional capacity to do the right things in trading ultimately just gets reduced and reduced and reduced if everything in your life is also not really going that well. And so you want to be mindful of that. And quite frankly, the best step is just to walk away. In fact, one of the criteria that I have before I even look at the charts is to assess my mentality. Not my mentality, but I call it my mental edge. Like, how in the zone am I coming into that day? And if my thoughts are wandering, if I can't help but think about the money that I lost in the past, then I just don't trade for that day. Because again, you taking a break from that day and potentially losing out on money is a lot better than you showing up that day and then blowing up your entire account because you have all of this accumulated emotions. And so this step is simply just not only doing the right things and not only implementing that two-step process in your trading session, but also the fact that you can implement that two-step process in your everyday life. Because more often than not, the same thoughts that pop up in trading are going to pop up in your day-to-day life. And you entertaining those thoughts, you feeding into that, will only make you even more susceptible to showing up the next day, showing up the next trading session without any mental edge left over for you to actually follow the plan that you set for yourself. And lastly, this is a very important step, but you have to track your progress, because if it takes you 12 months to completely get rid of your overtrading habit, then it sucks to feel like a winner only at the very end of those 12 months. In fact, if you feel like a loser because you took 10 trades, 10 junk trades in January, and then 5 junk trades in February, and then 2 junk trades in March, you're going to feel really shitty for yourself, even though you're making progress. So if you want to improve the odds that you actually follow through with, I guess not even just trading, but in whenever you encounter those times where things are very difficult, if you want to improve the odds that you actually succeed past those setbacks, then it helps to look back on your progress. And you cannot do that if you do not have a way to track it. So I would highly recommend at the end of every month or at the end of a set period, just track the amount of trades, track the amount of junk trades that you've taken. And if you even have to, chart it on a plot it on a chart and see the trend. And if the trend is moving in the direction of profitability, so in this case, if you're taking less junk trades and you're not over trading as much as you did the month before, then that's a win for you, even if you might have taken one junk trade for the whole month. Number 9, just record your progress, because you need to keep track of the small wins so you're better able to accumulate and keep persevering so you can achieve the bigger wins. So that is pretty much all of the steps. It's impossible for me to hold your hand because each one of you will have your very own problems that you have to solve. Because again, the specific situation which triggers you emotionally and honestly, the emotions that you feel, all of those are going to be a case by case basis. So my best piece of advice is just to think about different ways to reframe what's happening. And a lot of the different reframings that I do today are just random thoughts that came up when I was trading. Because here's actually another thing, or like another mental framework. But when I'm in a trade and I feel very uncertain and I start to get very emotional because I don't know if the trade is going to be a win or a loss, what helps in my head is actually playing out what happens if price were to hit my profit target or my stop loss. So if the trade is green, guess what? My life doesn't change. I'm still going to show up tomorrow. Nothing's really going to happen with the money. I'm just going to leave that in my account anyways. And if I lose, then guess what? The same thing. I just might have a slightly lower account balance than if the trade was a winner. But being able to play out the specific situations and just understanding that nothing in my life is going to drastically alter or change helps me step away from the outcome of that trade, knowing that I don't need the trade to play out a certain way. In fact, everything in my life is set up so that I don't have to obsess about that single outcome. And after reminding myself that, then I'm able to, remember that's like my countering thought, then I'm able to focus back on the present and what I need to be doing in the moment. So those types of mental reframings, those countering thoughts, those are just things that you have to find out for yourself. But luckily with journaling, you're able to track your thoughts in real time. And when you make a mistake, you're eventually going to make a mistake, you can think back and reflect on the different things that you can implement come time to face those similar situations in the future. And I just wanted to leave you with a final reminder that this is going to be almost a never-ending process, because even if you completely solve all of your overtrading problems, the emotions are still going to be there. Remember, you don't want to think of yourself as a robot who has no emotions at all. You need to remind yourself that you're a human being. And I, like you, probably got into trading just because of the highs of potentially making money. And you don't want to like really dumb that down a lot. You just want to remind yourself that the main way how you're going to be profitable is take trades that align with your profitable edge. Even if you feel emotions, you can still do the right thing. Whether that right thing is reframing what happened so that the intensity of emotions are a lot less, or stepping away from the charts altogether. So you just want to focus on doing the right things, and I can almost promise you that over the long term, As long as you're taking trades with some sort of profitable edge and you're following that system and you're continuously seeking ways to grow, then you'll make money. You'll make money even when you feel those same emotions that you did when you weren't making money at all. And that essentially wraps up the whole entire process. Remember that even when you're scaling your money, you're probably going to feel the same emotions that you did. For example, the trader who risks $100,000 still probably feels, they still probably have feelings similar to when they were only risking $1,000. And it's not necessarily just the intensity of the emotions, because it's all relative at the end of the day. So just understand that this is going to be a continuous process of getting better and better and better, and that you're never going to just simply arrive to this point where everything is perfect. It's going to be a continuous journey, but in that, you can find improvement, and within that improvement, then you'll find hopefully a sense of fulfillment in the act of trading itself.